Dead weight was the last thing he said about her before losing absolutely everything.
My mother always said silence is the most powerful weapon a woman can have. I learned that on a Christmas night when I heard my only son call me a dead weight for the first time. But the real lesson came when I decided to use that silence to disappear from his life, legally, financially, and emotionally. My name was Choi Hae-reem. Was, because the woman you know now doesn't exist anymore. Let me take you back 6 months before that Christmas night. I was 68 years old, living in a Korean neighborhood in Flushing, Queens, New York. My son, Junho, had just married a woman named Ashley. Blonde, perfect smile, and a way of looking at me like I was a stain on her carpet. They lived in Manhattan, in an apartment I helped pay for, but that's a detail you'll discover later. I worked my entire life. I arrived in the United States at 19 with a suitcase of used clothes and a promise to myself my son would have everything I never had. And he did. Private school, Columbia University, MBA from Wharton, every cent I earned, selling homemade kimchi, sewing clothes, and cleaning houses went to him. And I don't regret it. Or rather, I didn't regret it. The first time I noticed something was wrong was during Thanksgiving. I arrived at their place with 3 dishes of Korean food, galbijjim, japchae, and my famous kimchi that Junho always loved. Ashley opened the door with a forced smile. "Oh, Hae-reem, you didn't need to bring anything. We already have too much food." But the way she said Hae-reem, not mom, not mother-in-law, sounded like a dismissal. During dinner, I sat at the end of the table. Junho barely looked at me. When I tried to serve him galbijjim, Ashley interrupted. "Junho's on a diet, Hae-reem. No carbs." I looked at my son's plate, full of her dry, bland turkey. He said nothing, just lowered his eyes. In that moment, something inside me cracked. It didn't break, not yet, but it cracked. 2 weeks later, I needed knee surgery. I called Junho to pick me up from the hospital. "Mom, I'm busy. Take an Uber." Uber. At 68 years old, after surgery, he wanted me to take an Uber. I called my friend Soon-mi, who picked me up and stayed with me for 3 days. Junho showed up on the 4th day with wilted supermarket flowers. "Sorry, Mom. Work. You know how it is." But the worst was yet to come. A week before Christmas, Junho called me, not to invite me to dinner, to uninvite me. "Mom, Ashley's parents are going to be here and the house is small." The house I helped buy was too small for me? I swallowed the pain and said it was fine. But the call didn't hang up completely. And that's when I heard it. Junho's voice, distant but clear. Thank God she took it well. "My mom is dead weight. I can barely wait until she, you know." Ashley laughed. It wasn't a nervous giggle. It was genuine laughter, shared. "At least when she dies, you'll inherit that money she's been hoarding, right?" Junho sighed. "If she doesn't spend it all first. She lives like she's rich." I hung up the phone. My hands trembled. Not from anger. Not yet. From pure shock. My son, the boy I carried on my back through blizzards to get to school, the boy I swore to protect from all suffering, was waiting for my death and planning my inheritance? I spent that night in silence. Soon-mi called me 3 times. I didn't answer. I just sat in my small kitchen looking at the framed photo of Junho at 5 years old, smiling in his new school uniform. How much of that smile had been real? How much had been performance? The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Chin, a discreet man, son of immigrants like me who understood the importance of protecting what we build. "Mr. Chin, I need your help. I want to disappear." There was a pause. Legally, of course. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Come to my office tomorrow." What I discovered in that office changed everything. Mr. Chin explained something called civil death. Not exactly legal death, but a complete restructuring of identity and assets. Mrs. Choi, technically, you can transfer all your assets to an irrevocable trust, change your identity through a legal protection process, and essentially die for all financial and social purposes that your son knows. It was in that moment that the crack inside me finally broke. But it didn't shatter. It crystallized, transformed into something hard, clear, and sharp. A decision. "How long would it take?" I asked. Mr. Chin adjusted his glasses. "If we start today, we can finalize everything by Christmas." Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me. The time of year when Jesus was born, I would be reborn. Or rather, Choi Hae-rim would die, and someone new would emerge from the ashes. "Do it," I said. "But there's one condition. I want my son to find out exactly on Christmas Day. I want it to be my gift to him." Mr. Chin smiled, a small, professional smile, but with a hint of admiration. "Mrs. Choi, I think we'll have a lot of work ahead." And we did. But first, I needed to make sure every detail was perfect, because revenge, when done correctly, isn't about anger. It's about justice, and justice requires precision. The next 3 weeks were a blur of paperwork, notarizations, and secret meetings. Mr. Chin introduced me to a woman named Detective Park, retired NYPD, Korean American, who specialized in witness protection-style identity changes for people who weren't actually witnesses but needed to vanish anyway. "I've seen cases like yours before," she told me over tea in her small office in Koreatown. "Adult children waiting for parents to die. It's more common than you think." But what Detective Park said next made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Choi, before we proceed, I need to ask you something. Has your son ever tried to expedite your death?" I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She pulled out a folder. "I did some preliminary research. Your son has a life insurance policy on you. $2 million. Did you know about this?" I didn't. My hand started shaking again. "When did he take it out?" She slid the document across the table. 6 months ago, right after his wedding." The pieces started falling into place. The sudden disinterest, the cold shoulders, the small house excuse. He wasn't just waiting for me to die naturally. He was planning for it. "Is there more?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Detective Park nodded grimly. "I pulled his financial records, legally, through some contacts. Mrs. Choi, your son is broke. The apartment you think you helped with? He took out a second mortgage. The car? Leased and 3 months behind. His business? Failing. That insurance policy on you is the only thing keeping him afloat in his mind." I felt like I was falling. Everything I'd built for him, every sacrifice, every cold winter morning scrubbing floors, and he'd gambled it all away. And now I was his exit strategy, his retirement plan, his lottery ticket. "What do you want to do?" Detective Park asked softly. I looked up at her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. "I want to show him what real loss feels like. I want him to believe I'm dead, and then I want him to discover he gets nothing, worse than nothing." Over the next 2 weeks, we built an airtight plan. First, I transferred all my assets, the small house in Flushing I owned outright, my savings account with almost $400,000, my investment accounts, even the small life insurance policy I had on myself, into an irrevocable trust. The beneficiary? Not Juno. A charitable foundation I created called the Second Chances Fund for elderly Korean immigrants who needed help. But that wasn't enough. I wanted Junho to feel what I felt. That crushing moment of betrayal. So Detective Park helped me craft something special. A letter. A final letter from me to him that would be delivered on Christmas morning, along with legal documents showing exactly what happened to his inheritance. December 20th arrived. That was the day Choi Hae-rim would officially disappear. I had already moved most of my personal belongings to a storage unit under my new identity, Lee Bo-mi. A fresh start. A name that meant beautiful spring, because that's what this was. After 68 years of winter, my spring was finally coming. Sunmi was the only person who knew the truth. I couldn't leave without telling her. We'd been friends for 30 years, ever since we worked together at the garment factory in Chinatown. When I explained everything, she cried. Not because she disagreed, because she understood. "Hae-rim, you deserve better," she said, holding my hands. "You always have. When this is over, I'll contact you from my new life, but for now, you have to act like you don't know where I am. Can you do that?" She nodded firmly. "For you, I'd do anything." That's the thing about real friends. They don't question your pain. They just hold space for it. On December 21st, I staged my disappearance carefully. I went to my usual places, the Korean grocery store, the church, the senior center. I made sure people saw me. I even mentioned to Mrs. Kim at the grocery store that I wasn't feeling well. "My chest feels heavy," I said, clutching my heart dramatically. She looked concerned. "You should see a doctor, Hae-rim." I smiled weakly. "I will, after Christmas." That night, I took one last walk through my neighborhood. The Christmas lights reflected off the snow, creating a magical glow. Children played in the park, their laughter echoing in the cold air. For a moment, I felt sadness, not for leaving Junho, but for leaving this version of myself behind. Choi Hae-rim had been through so much. She'd survived poverty, immigration, racism, widowhood, single motherhood. She'd earned her rest. December 22nd was moving day. Detective Park picked me up at 4 in the morning in an unmarked car. The streets were empty, silent except for the crunch of snow under tires. I'd packed everything that mattered into 2 suitcases. Photos of my late husband, my mother's jade bracelet, a few books, and the clothes on my back. Everything else, just things. Meaningless without the memories attached. We drove to a small apartment in Fort Lee, New Jersey, just across the George Washington Bridge, but a world away from my old life. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a modest building with a view of the Manhattan skyline. My new life, looking back at my old one. The irony wasn't lost on me. Detective Park helped me carry the suitcases up. The apartment was furnished simply: a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a couch that's seen better days, but it was clean, warm, and most importantly, mine. Not Junho's, not his future inheritance, mine. "All your documents are in here," Detective Park said, handing me a thick folder. Inside was my new driver's license, social security card, bank accounts, everything under Lee Bo-mi. "Your trust is managed by Mr. Chen. Your old house will go on the market after Christmas. The proceeds go directly to your foundation. And this," she handed me a sealed envelope, "is the letter that will be delivered to your son on Christmas morning." I held the envelope like it was made of glass. Inside was everything I wanted to say but never could. Every disappointment, every heartbreak, every moment of betrayal, but also something else. The final proof that actions have consequences, that treating people like dead weight eventually makes them disappear. "One more thing," Detective Park said, pulling out her phone. "I need you to record a voice message, just in case Junho tries to claim foul play or file a missing persons report. We need proof you left voluntarily." I nodded and took the phone. My voice shook as I spoke. "My name is Choi Hae-rim. Today is December 22nd. I am leaving my home and my son of my own free will. I am not in danger. I am not being coerced. I simply choose to live the rest of my life on my own terms. If you're hearing this, it means my son is looking for me. Tell him to stop. Tell him I'm exactly where I want to be, anywhere but near him. Detective Park saved the recording and gave me a small, sad smile. You're one of the bravest women I've ever met, Mrs. Choi, or should I say, Ms. Lee? I smiled back. Ms. Lee. Choi Hee-rim is already dead. She just doesn't know it yet. That night, alone in my new apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the moment Junho would open that letter. Would he cry? Would he rage? Would he feel anything at all? Or would his first thought be about the money he'd lost? I suspected the latter. And that thought, more than anything, confirmed I'd made the right choice. December 23rd arrived cold and bright. My old phone rang 3 times. Junho. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Mom, Ashley's parents canceled. If you want to come for Christmas dinner, you can. The audacity. The absolute audacity. I was a backup plan, a last resort, a consolation prize when the real guests fell through. I deleted the message and turned off the phone for the last time. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not for Junho, not for some future grandchild I'd probably never have. For me. I bought a new winter coat, soft and red. I bought watercolor paints and a small easel. I bought ingredients for kimchi jjigae and made it exactly how I liked it. Extra spicy, the way Junho always hated. That night, eating my stew alone in my small apartment, I felt something unexpected. Peace. For the first time in decades, I wasn't cooking for someone else's approval. I wasn't measuring my worth by how well I served others. I was just existing. And it was enough. Christmas Eve arrived. In my old life, I'd have been cooking for hours. Galbi, japchae, tteokguk, dozens of dishes Junho would eat without thanks. But Lee Bo-mi had no such obligations. I ordered jjajangmyeon from a Korean-Chinese restaurant nearby and ate it straight from the container while watching the snow fall over Manhattan. My new phone buzzed, a text from Sunmi. Are you okay? I smiled and typed back, I'm more than okay. I'm free. She responded immediately, I'm so proud of you. Merry Christmas, my friend. I set down the phone and cried. Not sad tears, relief tears. The kind that come when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to bear. At midnight, I stood by my window watching the city lights. Somewhere across that river, Junho was probably asleep, oblivious to what tomorrow would bring. In a few hours, a courier would ring his doorbell. He'd signed for a letter. He'd open it, and his world would shatter. I should have felt guilty. A good mother would feel guilty. But Choi Hee-rim wasn't a good mother anymore. She was a dead woman. And Lee Bo-mi? She felt nothing but cold, clear justice. Christmas morning arrived bright and brutal. I imagined the scene. The doorbell at 8 a.m., Junho stumbling to the door in his pajamas, Ashley complaining about being woken early, the courier, professional and indifferent, holding out a tablet for signature, Junho's hand scrawling his name without knowing he was signing for his own reckoning. The letter said this, Junho, by the time you read this, I am gone. Not dead, though I know that's what you've been waiting for. Just gone. I heard everything you said about me, every word. Dead weight, can't wait until she dies, that money she's hoarding. Did you really think I wouldn't find out about the life insurance policy? $2 million on your mother's life. That's what I'm worth to you. Not my love, not my sacrifice, just my death benefit. I'd memorized every word. It continued, "But here's what you didn't know. Every dollar you thought you'd inherit, gone. Donated to a foundation that helps elderly immigrants, people like me who gave everything for ungrateful children like you. The house? Sold. The savings? Redistributed. Even the small life insurance policy I had on myself, you're not the beneficiary anymore. You will get exactly what you gave me in my final years. Nothing." And then the paragraph I'd agonized over most. "I raised you to be better than this. I sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities I never had, and you repaid me by waiting for my death like a vulture circling a carcass. So I'm giving you what you wanted. Choi Hae-rim is dead. Dead to you. Dead to your greed. Dead to your cruelty. But unlike the death you were hoping for, this one comes with consequences. You don't get to mourn. You don't get to play the grieving son. You don't get to claim my body or my memory. You get nothing. Merry Christmas, Junho. I hope it was worth it." At 9 a.m., Mr. Chen would deliver the second package. Legal documents showing the trust, the asset transfers, the foundation charter. Everything notarized, witnessed, ironclad. Junho would scramble for his phone, calling lawyers, calling me, calling anyone who might undo this. But there was nothing to undo. I'd made every decision while of sound mind, with psychiatric evaluations and witnesses to prove it. I spent Christmas Day painting. My first watercolor was clumsy, childish, a simple landscape of mountains and sky. But it was mine, created by my hands, for my eyes only. No one to judge it, no one to criticize, just me and the brush and the paper. Senmi called at noon, crying and laughing simultaneously. "He showed up at my door at 10 a.m., she said between sobs, "screaming, demanding to know where you were. I said I had no idea. He threatened to call the police. I told him, go ahead, you haven't committed any crime." "Did he? Call the police?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sunmi confirmed. "They came to your old house, found it empty, but no signs of foul play. Juno tried to file a missing persons report, but the officers said you're an adult who clearly left voluntarily. One officer apparently told him, 'Sir, sometimes parents leave their children. Have you considered why?'" I laughed. Real, genuine laughter. The kind that comes from deep in your belly. The kind that heals wounds you didn't know you had. "What did he say to that?" Sunmi snorted. "Nothing. He just stood there with his mouth open like a fish." Ashley was behind him, looking mortified. I think she finally realized what kind of man she married. We talked for an hour. Sunmi told me about her Christmas. Quiet, simple, shared with her daughter and grandchildren. Real family, the kind built on love, not obligation. Before we hung up, she said, "Hey, Boomy, I'm so proud of you. You taught me something today, that it's never too late to choose yourself." The days after Christmas blurred together. I established routines in my new life. Morning walks along the Hudson River, afternoons at the Fort Lee Library, reading books I'd never had time for. Evenings painting or cooking small meals just for myself. It was quiet, simple, and absolutely perfect. In early January, Mr. Chen called with an update. "Your son hired a lawyer. They're trying to contest the trust." I felt my stomach drop. "Can they?" Mr. Chen's voice was calm, reassuring. "No. I made sure everything was bulletproof. They're arguing undue influence, but we have psychiatric evaluations showing you were of sound mind. They're arguing you were coerced, but we have the recording of you stating otherwise. They have no case. They're just desperate." "How desperate?" I asked. Mr. Chen paused. "Desperate enough that Junho took out a loan against his car to pay the lawyer. He's hemorrhaging money trying to get your money. The irony is almost poetic." It was poetic. He'd taken out a life insurance policy on me, hoping to profit from my death. Now he was bankrupting himself, trying to profit from my disappearance. Karma had a wicked human sense of humor. By mid-January, I'd started volunteering at a Korean community center in Fort Lee. They needed help teaching English to elderly immigrants, people just like I'd been 40 years ago, struggling with a new language in a strange land. The work was fulfilling in ways I hadn't expected. Each person I helped was a version of my younger self, given the support I'd never had. One woman, Mrs. Bach, reminded me particularly of myself. 65, widowed, living with a daughter who treated her like an inconvenience. "My daughter says I'm a burden," Mrs. Bach told me one day after class, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "She says I should go back to Korea. But Korea isn't home anymore. Neither is here. I don't belong anywhere." I took her hands in mine. "You belong to yourself," I said firmly. "Not to Korea, not to your daughter, to yourself, and that's enough." She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Maybe I had. The language of self-worth is foreign to so many immigrant mothers. We're taught to sacrifice, to serve, to disappear into the needs of others. We're never taught that we matter too. Over tea after class, I told Mrs. Bach an edited version of my story. Not the whole truth. That felt too raw, too private, but enough. I told her about a woman I knew who'd been treated like dead weight by her son, who'd disappeared rather than continue being diminished. "What happened to her?" Mrs. Bach asked me. I smiled. "She's living her best life, free, happy, finally putting herself first." Mrs. Bach was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think it's too late for me to choose myself?" I squeezed her hand. "It's never too late. I know a woman who did it at 68. If she can, so can you." I didn't tell her that woman was me, but I think somehow she knew. In February, Sunmi visited my new apartment for the first time. She brought homemade mandu and rice cakes, and we spent the afternoon cooking together like old times. "How's Junho?" I asked, surprising myself. I thought I didn't care, but apparently some part of me, some small, stubborn, maternal part, still wondered. Sunmi's face darkened. "Not good. The lawyer fees bankrupted him. He had to move out of the Manhattan apartment. He's living in Ashley's mother's basement now. Ashley filed for divorce last week." I waited for the guilt to hit, the maternal instinct to fix it, to save him, to sacrifice myself again. But it didn't come. I felt nothing. Maybe a twinge of sadness for the boy he'd been, but nothing for the man he'd become. "Does he ask about me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Sunmi shook her head. "Not anymore. At first, constantly. But after his lawyer said there was no case, after he realized the money was truly gone, he stopped. It's like he accepted you're dead." Good. That was the point. Choi Hae-rim was dead. And the man grieving her loss wasn't crying for his mother. He was crying for his inheritance. March brought unexpected news. Mr. Chen called, his voice grave. "Miss Lee, your son filed for bankruptcy. As part of the proceedings, he had to disclose all his assets and liabilities, including the life insurance policy on you." My heart stopped. "And?" "The insurance company investigated. They discovered you're not actually dead. They're suing him for fraud." The world tilted. "Will they find me?" Mr. Chen's voice was calm. "No. Your legal name change and identity protections are solid. The insurance company doesn't care where Choi Hae-rim ends. They only care that Junho lied on the application and has been paying premiums on a policy he tried to fraudulently claim. He's facing criminal charges." Criminal charges. My son could go to prison. I waited for the maternal panic, the desperate urge to protect him, but instead I felt a cold, clear certainty. "What do you want me to do?" Mr. Chen asked carefully. "You could come forward, explain everything, possibly reduce his charges." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No. He made his choices. He took out that policy hoping I'd die. He gets to face the consequences. There was a pause. Then Mr. Chen said quietly, "You've become very strong, Miss Lee." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I always was strong. I just forgot for 49 years. The trial happened in April. I didn't attend, obviously. But Sunmi gave me updates. Junho pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and received 3 years probation plus restitution payments to the insurance company. No jail time, but a permanent criminal record. His lawyer tried to argue extenuating circumstances, his missing mother, his financial desperation, his mental health struggles. The judge wasn't sympathetic. "Your mother is missing," the judge said, according to Sunmi's report. "And your response was to take out a life insurance policy on her and wait for her death? That doesn't show concern. That shows greed. Probation granted, but understand this. You gambled on your mother's life and lost. I hope it was worth it." After the trial, Junho apparently had a breakdown. He was hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation for a week. Part of me, that same stubborn, atrophied maternal part, felt a flicker of something like pity. But mostly I felt vindicated. He'd wanted me gone. Now he was experiencing what that actually meant. Not relief, not inheritance, just empty, meaningless absence. Spring turned to summer. I celebrated my 70th birthday in June with friends from the community center, Mrs. Beck, Sunmi, a few other women who'd become my chosen family. We had Korean barbecue and soju and laughed until our sides hurt. Someone asked if I had children. "No," I said easily. "No children." And it was true. Lee Bo-mi had no children. Choi Hae-rim's son had died to her the same day she died to him. As I blew out the candles on my cake, I made a wish. Not for Junho to suffer more, not for revenge or vindication or apology. I wished for continued peace, for more days like this, for a life that remained beautifully, powerfully mine. In July, something unexpected happened. I received a letter forwarded by Mr. Chen. It was from Junho. Somehow, he'd convinced Mr. Chen to pass it along. Against my explicit wishes, Mr. Chen had agreed with a note, "You don't have to read this, but I thought you should have the choice." In early November, Mr. Chen called with news that made my blood run cold. "Miss Lee, Junho's been asking questions. He hired a private investigator." My heart stopped. "Did they find me?" Mr. Chen's voice was reassuring, but serious. "No, your identity change was thorough, but the investigator found something else. The foundation. They've connected Choi Hae-rim to the Second Chances Fund." "How?" I demanded, panic rising. "The charity registration had to list your former name as the initial donor for legal transparency. It's buried in paperwork, but a determined investigator could find it. Junho knows his mother's money funded a foundation for immigrant mothers. He doesn't know you're still involved, but he's suspicious." I felt the walls closing in. "What does he want?" Mr. Chen paused. "He wants to contest the foundation, claim you weren't of sound mind when you created it. He's arguing that the entire thing was an act of mental illness and therefore the assets should revert to him as next of kin." Rage flooded through me. Even now, even after everything, he was trying to take what wasn't his. "Can he win?" I asked through gritted teeth. Mr. Chen's voice hardened. "Not if I have anything to say about it. We have psychiatric evaluations, witness testimonies, recorded statements. But Miss Lee, there might be a hearing. And if there is, you'd have to testify." Testify? Face Junho in court? Let him see that I was alive, that I'd orchestrated everything, that his mother had chosen to die to him? The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "When?" I asked. "Preliminary hearing is scheduled for January, but Miss Lee, you don't have to do this. We can fight it with the evidence we have. You can remain Lee Bo-mi. He never has to know." I thought about it for 3 long minutes. Then, no. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. I'll testify. Let him see exactly what he lost. Let him face the mother he killed with his greed. The next 2 months were a blur of preparation. Mr. Chen coached me on testimony. Detective Park helped me prepare for the emotional impact of seeing Junho again. Sunmi held my hand through panic attacks and doubt. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one night over tea. "Once you testify, there's no going back. He'll know you're alive." I said quietly, He already knows. Deep down, he knows. This just makes it official. And honestly, I want him to see me. I want him to see that I'm not dead. I'm thriving, that his worst fear came true. I didn't die. I just stopped being his mother. December arrived bitterly cold. 1 year since my disappearance. 1 year since Junho received that letter. 1 year since Choi Hae-rim died and Lee Bo-mi was born. I spent the anniversary doing something symbolic. I legally changed my name one final time. Not back to Choi, but forward to something new entirely. Lee Bo-mi Hae-rim. Carrying both identities, honoring who I'd been while embracing who I'd become. Christmas Eve, I didn't spend alone this time. Mrs. Back, Minji, Sarah, the young woman from the community center, and several other women I'd helped through the foundation gathered in my small apartment. We cooked together, laughed together, shared stories of pain, survival, and transformation. "I want a toast," Mrs. Back said, raising her cup of soju. "To Miss Lee, to the woman who taught us that leaving isn't giving up, it's giving ourselves a chance." Everyone raised their cups. I felt tears streaming down my face. Good tears. Healing tears. "I'm not special," I said through the emotion. "I just got tired of being small. Tired of apologizing for existing. Tired of letting people treat my love like it was worthless." Minji squeezed my hand. "You showed us we matter. That's everything." That night, after everyone left, I stood by my window looking at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere across that river, Junho was probably alone. Did he think about me? Did he regret his choices? Or was he still just angry about the money? I realized with startling clarity, I didn't need to know. His feelings, his regrets, his pain, none of it was my responsibility anymore. I'd carried his emotional weight for 49 years. I was done. Christmas morning, I woke early and did something I'd been avoiding. I wrote a letter to my younger self. The 19-year-old who had arrived in America with nothing. The young mother who had worked 3 jobs. The widow who had raised a son alone. I wrote, "Dear Hae-rim, you will sacrifice everything. You will work until your hands bleed. You will go hungry so your son can eat. You will believe this is love. But one day, you'll discover it wasn't enough. He'll see you as dead weight, and it will break you. But here's what I need you to know. That breaking will save you. It will teach you that love without respect is exploitation. That sacrifice without gratitude is martyrdom. That you matter. Your pain matters. Your life matters. And choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. You're going to disappear. And when you do, you'll finally find yourself. I promise. With love, your future." I folded the letter and placed it in my journal. A record of transformation. Proof that it's never too late to become who you are meant to be. New Year's arrived with snow and anticipation. The hearing was scheduled for January 15th, 2 weeks away. I was terrified and ready in equal measure. Sunmi came to visit, helping me pick an outfit for court. "Something that says I'm alive and I'm powerful," she declared, pulling clothes from my closet. We settled on a navy suit, professional, dignified, unapologetically present. "He's going to hate seeing you look this good," Sunmi said with a wicked grin. I smiled back. "Good. Let him see what thriving looks like. Let him see the mother he threw away, blooming without him." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the moment our eyes would meet across that courtroom. What would I see? Rage? Shame? Regret? And more importantly, what would I feel? I'd spent a year convinced I felt nothing for him, but facing him would be the real test. Detective Park called at midnight. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. I laughed weakly. "Is it that obvious?" She was quiet for a moment. "Miss Lee, I've worked with dozens of people who disappeared from toxic families. You're the only one brave enough to come back and face them. That takes incredible strength." "Or incredible stupidity," I muttered. Maybe both, she agreed. But here's what I know. Tomorrow, you're not just testifying for yourself. You're testifying for every woman who was told her pain doesn't matter, every mother who was used until there was nothing left, every immigrant who gave everything and got nothing. You're their voice too. That perspective shifted something in me. This wasn't about Junho anymore. It was about something bigger. A statement that we, immigrant mothers, sacrificial women, invisible laborers, mattered, that our lives had value beyond what we could give others. January 15th arrived, cold and bright. Sunmi picked me up at 7 a.m. We drove to the Manhattan courthouse in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled up to the building, I saw him, Junho, standing on the courthouse steps, looking older, heavier, diminished. Our eyes met through the car window. I watched recognition and shock flood his face. He'd known intellectually I might be alive, but seeing me, alive, healthy, well-dressed, was different. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. I stepped out of the car slowly, deliberately, held my head high, walked past him without a word. The bailiff held the door open, and I entered the courthouse, leaving my son standing in the cold exactly as he'd left me. The courtroom was small, formal, intimidating. Mr. Chen was already there, along with the foundation's board members. Junho entered minutes later with his lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly knew this was a losing case. The judge entered, and we all stood. Judge Sandra Martinez, a Latina woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Be seated," she said crisply. "This is a preliminary hearing regarding the estate and charitable trust of Choi Hai-rim, now known as Lee Bo-reem. Mr. Choi, your petition contests the validity of said trust. Is that correct?" Junho's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We contend that Mrs. Choi was not of sound mind when she created the trust and effectively abandoned her family." Judge Martinez's eyebrow raised. "Abandoned her family? Mr. Choi, isn't it true that you're an only child and your client is a single adult with no dependents?" The lawyer stammered, "Well, yes, but—" The judge cut him off. "So who exactly was abandoned? An adult son?" She looked directly at Junho. "Mr. Choi, you're 43 years old, correct?" Junho nodded. "And your mother was 68 years old when she created this trust?" Another nod. "So your argument is that a 68-year-old woman of sound mind cannot dispose of her own assets as she sees fit?" I watched Junho squirm. This wasn't going how he'd expected. His lawyer tried to recover. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe Mrs. Choi was under duress." Judge Martinez held up her hand. "I've reviewed the evidence. Psychiatric evaluations, video testimony, witness statements. Unless you have evidence of actual coercion, this seems like a waste of the court's time." Then she turned to me. "Miss Lee, would you like to make a statement?" I stood, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor." I looked directly at Junho. I created that foundation with a clear mind and a broken heart, broken by a son who saw me as dead weight, who took out a life insurance policy on me, hoping to profit from my death, who couldn't wait for his inheritance. Junho's face went white. The judge's expression hardened. I continued. "I gave that man everything, 49 years of sacrifice, every dollar I earned, every ounce of love I had, and he repaid me by treating me like a burden. So yes, I left. I took my assets and gave them to people who actually needed help. People like me, immigrant mothers used and discarded by ungrateful children." "Your Honor," I said, my voice gaining strength, "this isn't about mental illness. It's about self-preservation. It's about finally choosing myself after a lifetime of being chosen last. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The courtroom was silent. Judge Martinez looked at Junho with barely concealed disgust. "Mr. Choi, I've seen many things in this courtroom, but a middle-aged man trying to steal from a charity that helps abused elderly immigrants because he feels entitled to his living mother's money? That's a new low. She banged her gavel. Petition denied. The trust stands. Miss Lee's assets were disposed of legally and with clear intent. This court finds no evidence of diminished capacity or coercion. Case dismissed. She looked at Junho one more time. And Mr. Choi, maybe spend less time in court and more time reflecting on why your mother would rather give everything to strangers than leave you a single dollar. Court adjourned. As the judge left, I finally allowed myself to breathe. It was over. The trust was safe. The foundation was protected. And Junho was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. He approached me slowly as people filed out. "Mom," he whispered. Just that one word, heavy with everything unsaid. I looked at him, really looked at him. The gray hair, the weight gain, the defeat in his eyes. And I felt pity. Not love, not hate, just sad pity for a man who'd gambled everything on his mother's death and lost. "I'm not your mother anymore," I said quietly. "Choi Hae-rim was your mother. She died the day you called her dead weight. I'm Lee Bo-mi, and you're a stranger who once benefited from a woman's unconditional love until you bled her dry." "I'm sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. But Mom, please." I held up my hand. "Don't. Your apology is a year too late and about 49 years too little. You're sorry now because you lost, not because you hurt me. There's a difference." I turned to leave. He grabbed my arm. "Please, can we start over? Can I earn your forgiveness?" I gently removed his hand. "Junho, forgiveness isn't earned, it's given. And I choose not to give it. Not because I'm cruel, but because you just see it as permission to hurt me again. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. This is one of them." I walked away, out of the courtroom, out of his life, out of the role of mother that had defined and destroyed me. Sunmi was waiting in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. "You were magnificent," she said, hugging me tight. "So strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, relieved, free, like I'd been carrying a boulder for decades and finally set it down. My shoulders felt lighter, my chest felt open. For the first time in my entire life, I felt unencumbered. We celebrated that night, Mr. Chen, Detective Park, Sunmi, Mrs. Beck, Minji, Sarah, and several others from the foundation. Someone brought champagne. We toasted the victory, to justice, to women choosing themselves. "To Lee Bo-mi," Mr. Chen said, raising his glass, "a woman who taught us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life." But the real celebration came later, alone in my apartment. I stood by my window looking at the city lights and realized something profound. I'd won. Not just the court case, but the larger battle for my own soul. I'd faced my greatest fear, confronting my son, and survived. I told my truth, set my boundary, walked away. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, it had just begun. That night, I painted until dawn, not landscapes or still lives, but a portrait of Choi Hae-rim, the woman I had been. Tired eyes, bent shoulders, hands aged beyond their years. But I painted something else too, a small light behind her eyes. Hope, resilience, the seeds of Lee Bo-mi waiting to bloom. I hung the painting on my wall, a reminder of where I'd been, a testament to how far I'd come. Choi Hae-rim wasn't my enemy. She was my teacher. She'd shown me what happens when you love without boundaries. And in her death, she'd given me life. The foundation continued to grow. By the end of January, we'd helped 53 families. The court victory had brought media attention. A local Korean newspaper ran a story, "Immigrant Mother Creates Foundation After Son's Betrayal." It went viral in the community. Donations started pouring in. Other women shared their stories, sons who had stolen, daughters who had abandoned, families who had exploited. Each story was a variation of the same theme. Love without respect becomes abuse. Sacrifice without reciprocity becomes martyrdom. And each woman found hope in my story, proof that escape was possible, that it was never too late, that choosing yourself wasn't selfish. It was survival.